Hello and welcome to Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. I'm Ian Masters, and today we'll look into a number of stories and issues in the news. We'll begin and go to Israel to speak with Ori Goldberg, an Israeli author, academic and political commentator, a former university professor who has written extensively on Iran, Israel, and the relationship between religion and politics in the Middle East. He is currently an independent Israeli political analyst. He writes regularly for New Lines magazine, where his latest articles include Laranjani shows Israel is addicted to pointless, flashy assassinations, and Israel can't maintain a long war with Iran, and the US isn't interested. We'll discuss what life is like in Tel Aviv, having to repeatedly retreat to bomb shelters while scrambling for food at supermarkets. But according to Ori, 90% of Israelis support this misbegotten war and their long-serving, corrupt, and egomaniacal leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. Then, with Trump's war on Iran seen by many as a way to distract attention from the Epstein files, we'll examine the FBI DOJ cover-up underway protecting Trump from whatever is in the 3 million files that Patel and Bondi are hiding or perhaps have already shredded. Joining us for an update is Nina Burleigh, a senior editor at The New Republic, best-selling author, documentary producer, and publisher of the Substack American Freak Show. A professor at New York University's Arthur J. Carter Journalism Institute. She's written 7 books, the latest of which include Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women, and she has a new novel, Turn Around, Don't Drown. She's the producer of a documentary series on Apple TV, Epstein's Shadow, and we will discuss her article at American Freak Show, The Epstein Accords Part 1, The Road to Riyadh. And before we begin, with Trump having bombed 7 countries and started a war against Iran, while at home his ICE thugs terrorize and break up families, murdering American citizens in the process, the need to rid the country of the deeply unpopular Trump kakistocracy and his clown car cabinet could not be more urgent. But these crooks and criminals would do anything to stay in power, as their billionaire buddies buy up the mainstream media and the mob boss intimidates Republican politicians. Only people power can beat money power, and we need all hands on deck as we continue to do our part, delivering a daily public service, providing the facts and evidence to inform the majority of what they are up against and how to win back our country, our decency, and the respect of the community of nations. You can help save America's 250-year-old democracy by making a tax-deductible donation at backgroundbriefing.org/donate or at publictruthmedia.org, and thank you. And joining us now from Tel Aviv, Israel, is Ori Goldberg, an Israeli author, academic, and political commentator, a former university professor who has written extensively on Iran, Israel, and the relationship between religion and politics in the Middle East. He's currently an independent Israeli political analyst and writes regularly for New Lines magazine, where his latest articles include Laranjani shows Israel is addicted to pointless, flashy assassinations, and Israel can't maintain a long war with Iran, and the US isn't interested. Welcome to Background Briefing, Ori Goldberg.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. And the Israeli historian Martin Van Kriewel described the US war on Iraq as, and this of course was championed, as you know, by Netanyahu and the neocons, he had described the war as the worst strategic mistake since Emperor Augustus sent his legions into Germany in 8 AD. How do you think historians are going to look back at the current Israel-U.S. war on Iran?
Oh, I don't think we'll need a historical verdict to ascertain that this war was a mistake. It's proving to be a mistake as it's being fought. And the main reason it's a mistake, it's because both the United States and Israel went into this assuming that they could carry out some sort of shock and awe operation in the case of the United States, or destruction along the lines of what happened in Gaza in the case of Israel, but neither had any kind of strategic goal, no matter how much they repeated the empty words regime change. And when you don't have a goal once you enter a war, famously the realm of uncertainty, then you're going to lose, because victory in a war is not defined by a factual achievement by how many people you've killed, by how many tanks you've captured, by waving your flag on top of the castle in the enemy's capital. Victory in a war is a political decision. If you don't know where you're going, then it doesn't matter how you get there. And Israel and America get lost.
And according to reporting in the New York Times, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is on the phone all the time urging Trump to finish the job. It looks as if Trump is certainly wavering. He may well have he announced this threat, gave the Iranians 48 hours before he would bomb their electrical and water infrastructure, and then he backed away from that, gave them 5 days. Most people seem to think that that had a lot more to do with the stock market and the price of oil than any strategic considerations about what's happening in the Middle East. Trump claimed that they're talking to somebody who's been identified as a Speaker of the Parliament, Kalibaf, who Trump said he's negotiating with. And then Kalibaf turns around and says no negotiations have been held with the US, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the US and Israel are trapped. Don't necessarily want to believe anybody in this thing, whether it's Netanyahu, Trump, or the Iranians, but I must say it sounds like the Iranian Speaker of the Parliament may be right. Do you think this is really about manipulating the markets because Trump is worried about the price of gas?
Well, I think any explanation of major world events that depends heavily on economic factors is always correct, but it always fails to explain the entire event. People are always motivated by such factors. Certainly, Trump, who's never been bashful about the opportunity for himself and for his cronies to make money off of his political career. I don't think it explains the whole thing. I think what we're seeing here is the inversion of the accepted world order or the regional order in the Middle East. And I think the Iranians are relishing that inversion. I highly doubt that the Iranians are not negotiating with the Americans. Trump may have blown the whistle, and of course, he delivered the news with his if you want to be nice to Trump, you can call it cryptic. If you want to be less nice, you can call it demented attention to detail about how they're talking to some leader, not the supreme leader, a top guy. He can't really say. I actually think sending somebody like Mohammed Baqir Ghalibaf, the Speaker of Parliament, to negotiate with the Americans may actually have happened. But the important thing here is that this is a negotiation, and the Iranians are the ones who are dictating the terms. That's where the tables have turned massively. And the Iranians are not in a hurry to stop this war. I think they need to stop it. I think they understand they have to. But they are enjoying very much watching Trump squirm, and they are very much, possibly even more, enjoying the marginalization of Israel in regional terms. As for the Saudi crown prince, I doubt that he wants the war to continue by all means because he feels the United States and Israel can subdue Iran. He may be hedging his bets. He may be urging Trump to do this because Trump is there for the urging, but he may also be preparing Saudi Arabia for regional fragmentation following this war, because it's quite obvious that when this war ends, and I for one think it'll end sooner rather than later, then regional reality will not be what it was before the war, and it will not return to what it was before the war. Things will be different, most particularly the dimming of the United States as the regional power and the potential protector of other regional subpowers from Iran or from any other threat to a regional stability based on an oil regime.
But in terms of who are the winners and losers, you've made it pretty clear that Iran is in the driver's seat here. But Russia is certainly a winner in terms of the price of oil, and Trump has taken sanctions off Russia, as he has with Iranian oil, of all things. But isn't MBS making money now? They can ship their oil through the Red Sea. I'm just wondering about whether or not he has a motive to keep this thing going.
He has some motive to keep this thing going, as does Russia. But what I said about economic factors also applies as an explanatory mechanism. also applies to grand game theories. Of course, this is all true. I mean, we're also talking about a global game of chess, not just about a regional clash. But I think that misses the enmity that has come to the forefront. I think it misses the bad blood, and I also think it profoundly misses the hubris that has shaped Israeli policy in the region. The assumption that Israel can get away with doing anything it wants, whenever it wants, wherever it wants. And I think Israel, at least at this stage, is the biggest loser of this war because it has been found lacking in just about every aspect of war fighting and of regional politics. Israel doesn't have a goal. It is apparently willing to use power against friend and foe alike, depending only on the whim of Israel's potentially eternal ruler, Benjamin Netanyahu. But even if he wasn't in place, it most likely would have been the same. And Israel, once it gets in, it does not know how to get out. It doesn't have an exit strategy. It doesn't have an end game. It can only crawl out. And in to make a long explanation much shorter, Israel is the premier agent of chaos in the region at the moment. And I think that even if bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, has an interest in keeping the war going, perhaps in attrition against Iran, he's fully cognizant of the fact that the United States' heart isn't in it, and that Israel is simply incapable of doing anything other than it has been doing since the war began, which is bomb massively. But the bombs, they can't get the sort of job done. They can't change regimes. They can't occupy the country. And living in Israel, I can tell you that while Iranians are shooting fewer missiles every day, Iranians are shooting missiles that are getting through our fabled air defenses. Life here is slowly but surely teetering. So to assume that Israel can simply carry on doing this because Netanyahu wants to is really missing out on what is happening in reality.
So, Ori, I want to talk to you about your articles where you describe having to go into the bomb shelter and people fighting over foodstuffs at supermarkets, etc. But why is the support for this war over 90% in Israel itself? That's what the polls are telling us.
Yeah, that's, I think in Israeli terms, that's a $64,000 question. Because that's the way it is here. We have a schizophrenic worldview. On the one hand, we're very suspicious generally of Netanyahu. Nobody really trusts Netanyahu. Everybody assumes he's mad to some degree with power. He's been prime minister for nearly 2 decades without any kind of interruption. That often happens when that is the case. People who have been protesting his government have been out in the streets vocally saying that his management of the events of October 7th and what followed October 7th was abysmal. But at heart, what Netanyahu is saying to the great majority of Jewish Israelis is appealing to them. He's saying that the only way Israel can be truly secure is if Israel alone is able to decide who its enemies are, and if Israel alone is able to act against them unilaterally, and perhaps most importantly, if Israel continues to enjoy absolute impunity. When Israeli Jews who were raised here with an occupation of Palestinian territories lasting almost 60 years, with periodic wars, with an understanding that has been growing over the past 2 decades that war is ultimately the only facet Israel has for releasing its internal steam and its existential quandaries. Israelis who are looking at what Netanyahu is doing may say he's not doing it well, it could have been done better or more efficiently, but left to their own devices, they will say, ultimately, there is no other solution. Nobody cares about us. The world hates us. The sensation that, everybody in the world is anti-Semitic and out for Jewish blood has grown much, much more powerful in Israeli society as Israeli discourses has plummeted to unprecedented lows. But still, that's the way it is here. So people can simultaneously be discontent, demonstrate discontent. They can be very mindful of the hardships of life. We haven't yet gotten to the point of actual fisticuffs over foodstuffs. But if this keeps going, then we will. But more than anything, our sense of existential stability has been thoroughly disturbed and shaken up. So people can be fully engrossed and engulfed by this wartime reality, But when they consider, a strategic vision or what will ultimately happen, they approve of what Netanyahu is doing. So does Netanyahu's parliamentary opposition almost completely. There hasn't been a single Israeli politician who hasn't not just supported this war, but justified this war and justified what Israel is doing in Lebanon and also justified what Israel is doing in Gaza. As long as that is the situation, Israelis will not protest the war, will not call for an end to it. We have an ethos of ignoring or downplaying our personal issues and difficulties when the nation is faced with an existential enemy. The fact that Iran has never been an existential enemy, the fact that we created this war, the fact that the Straits of Hormuz were open before the war and now opening them has become a war goal, the way the world got twisted in the incredibly cumbersome and elaborate Israeli and American web of lies, that is beside the point for most Israelis. This is the situation. We have to tough it out. Then we'll get rid of Netanyahu, not before.
So what are you hearing in Israel about the phone conversation that Vice President Vance had with Netanyahu, which apparently disintegrated into a shouting match because Vance was complaining about Israel's settlers beating up Palestinians in the West Bank?
I think this whole settler violence thing is a very efficient way for people in Israel who define themselves as liberals to blame the Gazan genocide and what has been happening in Iran and what is happening in Lebanon on an extreme fanatic, messianic, we like the word messianic, spirit that has hijacked Israel, that has taken Israel astray. Because before October 7th, Israel was a model of moderation and far-sighted strategy, according to that version of reality. Now you've got the settlers, and supposedly they're going crazy and killing Palestinians. And that's also good for the Trump administration, and it's actually quite good for the Netanyahu government as well, although Netanyahu is, to some extent, beholden to those settlers. It's good because it gives you a straw man. You can blame them for what's happening. So I don't necessarily trust Vance's shouting over settler violence. Settlers have killed Palestinian Americans, and America did absolutely nothing about it under Biden and under Trump as well. What is happening now, and it's happening in various sort of ways, including Netanyahu setting the head of Mossad apart as responsible for persuading the government that the chances of a new Iranian revolution are good if Israel bombs Iran. And just like President Trump set his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, apart by saying, Pete, I think you were the first one to speak up, what we're seeing is leaders attempting to distance themselves from what is really proving to be one of the grandest strategic mistakes ever made. So the wedge between DC and Jerusalem has been there since day one. It was very obvious that the United States and Israel were not sharing interests in this war, no matter how bombastic the rhetoric about Iran presenting the threat to world peace. Now, I think Trump feels that Israel has misled him. By the way, I have no doubt he's right. And he also thinks that Netanyahu has no interest to save him at the moment. And Netanyahu is interested in himself and only in himself. So when he sends Vance to talk to Netanyahu, he wants Vance to feel things out, but he also wants Vance to make it clear to Netanyahu that Washington's displeasure is mighty and it is about to rain down on Israel should Israel continue its obnoxious, destabilizing course.
So when President Obama had his last day in the White House before Trump moved in, he invited a bunch of reporters in, and he was asked, what is the greatest challenge in the future? And Obama answered, Putinism. So the reporter said, what do you mean by Putinism? And he said, by Putinism, I mean not just Putin, but Erdogan, Orban, and Netanyahu. So when you describe Netanyahu, it sort of reminded me of Obama's remark about Putinism. On the other hand, when you have leaders like Netanyahu and Trump, who are incredibly destructive and ego-driven, and in Trump's case, he's just an evil, horrible human being. I don't know Netanyahu that well, but we here in the United States are suffering under a really sick and dangerous man whose sins in the past are just monumental, and they're starting to dribble out. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, Ori, are we to blame? I mean, this guy was elected twice, for God's sake, and the Israelis keep electing Netanyahu. So who's at fault here?
In many ways, I think you're right. I think this isn't about Netanyahu or Trump exclusively. It's not about their deviant or pathological personalities. In Netanyahu's case, it makes perfect sense. He has been in power for 20 years, almost completely unhindered, and has been elected time and time again. And he's been elected not because he has taken over the country. He's been elected precisely for being able to reflect back to Israelis the consummate Israeli notion of good policy, of what essential Israeli interests are, and of how Israel takes care of things. A lot of Israelis trust Netanyahu in that regard, or at the very least, are unable and to some extent unwilling to offer any kind of opposition to what he's doing. So yes, of course, I think it's the publics who are to blame as well. I think in Trump's case, that is also true, partially because of the growing gap in the United States between the MAGA base and other political forces, partially because of the political self-imposed paralysis of the left, who became placating rather than representing any kind of social or political agenda that is clear. But I think we also have signs of hope. I think we're seeing signs not just of the hardcore right, as represented by leaders like Orban and Netanyahu and Trump potentially taking over. I think we're also seeing signs of a very energized, young, very politically minded left. I think Zach Polanski in the United Kingdom is doing incredible work with the Green Party. I think we're seeing the left awakening in places like France. I think we're seeing the left awakening over Europe. I think we're seeing left-wing governments in South America that are very directly standing up to Trump. People like President Petro of Colombia. And I think the battle lines are being drawn. There's no doubt that this right-wing movement that seems to have coalesced and seems to have converged and unified their collective power is, I don't know if it's holding sway, but is very, very much powerful at the moment. But I think that an opposition to this movement is not just in the making, but is very much already there. It's true that in the United States, Trump seems to be really enjoying royal status among his supporters, but I think the divide between the MAGA base, as big as it is, and the rest of the United States is now as big as it has ever been, certainly following this war. Regarding my country, I'm less optimistic. I think that after 2.5 years of carrying out a systemic genocidal campaign in Gaza, I think Israel has turned a corner that I doubt it can turn back of its own volition. I think we really have become a society that understands achievement and virtue only through the elimination of others. I think we've lost any kind of strategic vision. We are wholly engulfed by the notion that for us to live, they have to die, but that we have no way of linking even their deaths to any kind of understanding of what the future may bring. To be even more blunt, I think we've sort of given up on a future. I think we're living on a day-to-day basis. Or, if you even think about people living paycheck to paycheck, we're living war to war. And in that sense, I think Israel is a major threat to regional stability and to global stability, and that it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later in terms of international sanctions and its leadership brought to justice. But more than anything, the Israeli public, Israeli Jewish society, needs a major timeout, needs to stand alone in the corner for a few years. It needs to be held responsible for what it has done, and it needs to, I hope, it is given a chance to find a way to give new birth to itself, because as it is, living here again, having lived here all my life, I think that in many ways we're irredeemable.
Well, Ori Goldberg, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Ian.
And again, I've been speaking with Uri Goldberg, who's an Israeli author, academic, and political commentator, a former university professor. He's written extensively on Iran, Israel, and the relationship between religion and politics in the Middle East. He's currently an independent Israeli political analyst and writes regularly for New Lines magazine, where his latest articles include Laranjani shows Israel is addicted to pointless, flashy assassinations, and Israel can't maintain a long war with Iran, and the U.S. isn't interested. And he joined us from Tel Aviv, Israel. We're going to take a brief station break. We're back looking at how Trump's war on Iran is seen by many as a way to distract attention from the Epstein files, and we're examining the FBI DOJ cover-up underway, which is protecting Trump from whatever is in the 3 million files that Patel and Bondi are hiding or perhaps have already shredded. Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Nina Burleigh, a senior editor at The New Republic, best-selling author, documentary producer, and the publisher of the Substack American Freak Show, a professor at New York University's Arthur J. Carter Journalism Institute. Her journalism has been published widely, and she is the author of Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women. And she has a new novel, Turnaround, Don't Drown, and is the producer of the documentary series on Apple TV, Epstein's Shadow. And Nina has an article at American Freak Show, The Epstein Accords Part 1, The Road to Riyadh. Welcome to Background Briefing, Nina Burleigh.
Thank you, Ian. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. And last time we spoke was when the Department of Justice had leaked the missing files, the FBI 302s on women who had accused Trump of heinous behavior, along with Epstein, child rape, sodomy, etc. But the DOJ leaked it to both the Breitbart and to the Guardian, and then later they were actually forced to release the actual 302s, but there was still 37 pages missing. So what do we know about that? And also my understanding is that the victim involved in this, who was 13 when she alleges she was raped by Epstein and 15 when she was raped and sodomized by Trump. Is she the same person that they bought off, both Trump and Epstein, according to the estate, made a deal and paid her off for her silence? Is that
Well, I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, there's some suggestion that Trump may have given Epstein some money for that payoff, but I don't know that that's been proven. We know that she didn't get money from what they call the Victims' Compensation Fund, which was set up to pay Epstein victims. And that doesn't mean that she's not an Epstein victim, in my view, but that then we did know that she had settled with the Epstein estate. So that's a fact. Now, whether Trump gave Epstein money to split the bill, I'm not sure of. I've seen that mentioned, and I'm not sure if it's certainly not been mentioned in the mainstream media. So I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. To me, it's not definitively proven that Donald Trump co-paid for this settlement for this woman, but it definitely is the same woman that you're talking about here. Epstein did pay. Epstein estate paid her off.
And what do we know about the missing 37 pages from the DOJ?
Oh, we don't know anything at the moment. They're still missing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether they contain images or if they contain more factual information. But as far as I'm concerned, the search for the silver bullet that's going to bring down Trump in these documents. I mean, everybody's looking for the proof that he was, involved in some sexual behavior with underage girls along with Epstein. I am not convinced that that's ever going to come forward in a way that becomes the silver bullet. I think the problem is that Trump's predatory behavior towards women is already baked in to his persona, and his voters don't care. They might care if there was a woman who was 13 at the time who was provably victimized by him. But the problem again is he's an 80-year-old man, and he would be sitting across from a 65-year-old woman, and they're going to argue over something that happened 50 years ago or more. And I'm afraid that is not the silver bullet. That's not going to bring him down. I would be surprised. Now, that's not to say that we should stop hunting through these files for information about Trump and Epstein's relationship, or what Epstein was doing, which is, stuff that I've been writing about. But I don't know that that's the silver bullet. I could be proven wrong. The 37 pages could turn up and be released, and they could be, indisputable proof that he was raping a 13-year-old. But again, you have to remember, Ian, that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi put a legion of FBI agents on round-the-clock duty for 2 or 3 days in March of last year to sort through the files and find every mention of Donald Trump. And so I don't think that kind of material would have been allowed to remain in there if it was considered to be indisputable proof.
Well, that is what a lot of the lawmakers, and particularly Ro Khanna and Tom Massey, the ones that got the Epstein Transparency Act passed through unusual means, because the Speaker of the House, the good Christian, was holding up protecting Trump. But there's 3 million missing pages, and there's a lot of suspicion that the Patel and Bondi also shredded a lot of material. So the fact that 3 million documents and the possibility of a bunch of stuff being shredded is still out there indicates that even though the smoking gun hasn't emerged, then why in God's name are they holding up 3 million pieces of 3 million documents? I mean, there's a reason why they're holding onto those documents, surely.
Well, they've published 3 million pages. I guess the withholding of 3 million more pages, what more can we possibly learn from 3 million more pages? Well, we're still barely scratching the surface of what's in the ones that are released now, but we know that they are an extremely unflattering light into the recent history of the world, of global finance and tech and elites in all over Europe and the Middle East and in the United States, and acting in cahoots with each other to break rules, to enrich themselves, to take advantage of the little guy. And of course, the glue that held them all together was the absolutely abominable abuse of women. And so that's what's in there. And you see now, like just a few minutes ago, reporting from France that the French authorities, they've searched Rothschild Bank. I believe it's let me see this here. It's in relation to, well, one of the guys we were writing about last week, Terje Rod Larson, the Oslo Accords hero, who was such a buddy with Epstein and was a UN connected, and his wife, of course, was in the national or the Security Council of the UN until they all had to they had to leave because of the Epstein files. French authorities searched Paris arm of Swiss bank Edmond de Rothschild in Epstein affair, and they're looking into a former French diplomat and the assistant to Terje Rod Larson, the Oslo Accords guy, for sharing UN materials with Epstein illegally. And so, the Epstein files, the 3 million more pages that they haven't released, well, maybe they haven't gone through them and cleaned out Donald Trump yet. But, I would guess that they probably have a lot to do with certain banks and the behavior of bankers and banks and maybe more on like the Leon Blacks of the world. Maybe there's more material on that. There's more material on the activities of the CIA or the Mossad or the KGB in relation to elections. I think there would be a lot of material. There's potentially a lot of material in there that will open the eyes of the public to the way that we got where we are today, where you have MBS influencing and Netanyahu influencing the United States to ignite this regional conflagration that could flip into World War III in minutes.
Right, but last time we spoke, you ended the conversation, Nina, by saying that this war that had just started in Iran, or on Iran, might well be to distract us from Epstein, which is why I'm talking to you today, because I think this thing's still out there. And I want to talk to you, obviously, about your latest piece at American Freak Show, The Epstein Accords, Part 1, The Road to Riyadh. But as we speak now, there is massive possibilities of massive grift going on with inside knowledge that would lead to making a fortune on oil trades. The stock market is up and down like a jack-in-the-box. And who would know more about that? The people on the inside. And you've got, as your article makes clear, you've got, Epstein as the sort of predecessor of Jared Kushner, who's out there negotiating as Trump's envoy and also simultaneously soliciting billions from Gulf monarchs for his investment funds, apparently shaking the Saudis down for even more money. And extraordinarily as it may seem, now we're in a situation where Trump has paused his ultimatum to bomb Iran's electric and water facilities, saying that he's having private negotiations with the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Halibaf, who Halibaf then responds saying, no such talks are taking place. This is fake news that are intended to manipulate financial and oil markets and to escape the quagmire in which America and Israel are trapped. So I don't want to have to rely on the Iranians to tell me the truth, but my suspicion is that this guy may be right. Who's benefiting from all of this chaos and manipulation?
Well, I don't know that they would. I don't know that they would go to war for that reason, but I think that Donald Trump's, his boundless self-regard, lets him believe that his method of optics over facts or optics over reality, the method of his political method and his business method of, if it looks this way, it must be true. If I can make myself look rich, I'm rich. I'm a billionaire, right? That is his method of negotiating with people. And he thinks that he can pull that off with these Iranians. And they just don't even get it. I don't think they would even, it's a different culture, and they're so ignorant about that part of the world. These ignoramuses are running this war. And they think, well, let's let Donald do it. He's the master deal maker, which is what he thinks he is and what his followers think. And this is him pretending to be the master deal maker and lying about negotiating with the Iranians and thinking that that's going to make it so. And unfortunately, for us, it doesn't make it so. And there's war continuing, there's bombing going on, and he is going to have to take a loss to end this and take a loss back down. Maybe he can do it while enriching his friends to keep himself in power. I don't know, like tip them off to something that he's going to do and then make sure that they treasonously bet on it in the market 5 minutes before he does it. Maybe that saves him. But, I'm afraid that my Washington friends last year, Democrats, when I went down there after the election, they basically thought, the ultimate success of or the ultimate demise of Trump is unfortunately going to come with all of us going down with him. And that's what's looming on the horizon here, unfortunately. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Right. Well, we know that when he reversed himself on his ultimatum, the stock market was relieved, and so were the oil markets. But now they're back up. Oil's over 100 again. So yeah, it was a short-term hit. But if you're a short seller on Wall Street, you can make serious money.
Absolutely. And this is what he was doing with the tariffs. Remember?
Right.
Sure. Hit the gas, hit the brakes, hit the gas, hit the brakes.
Right.
And sure, yeah, the crypto, the whole thing is a gigantic klepto operation and corrupt as hell. And so I guess they're going to try to enrich themselves off of this. And he's surrounded by these alpha male guys who think that, rah, 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 let's go, go, go. And they'll ride the missile down to the ground.
And it even extends into, for example, the massive pot of money that they gave to ICE, 75 billion. Now we're learning that ICE and DHS are buying warehouses and paying 6, 7, 8 times the value of the property to warehouse thousands of people. So who's making the kickbacks there? I mean, I guess it's trickle-down graft, right? Or do you think Trump's got then the family have got their fingers in every pie?
I think the family has their fingers in everything.
Right. So, but I wanted to talk to you about your latest piece, The Epstein Accords, Part 1, The Road to Riyadh, because it's fascinating and clearly true that what Jared Kushner is doing now, the groundwork was laid by none other than Jeffrey Epstein. And all of these Norwegian connections that we're hearing now in the Epstein files that have come out, and the fact that the Norwegian royals have had to apologize, the prime minister has been disgraced, and the Oslo Accords negotiator, you mentioned Rod Larson, is key to it all. So walk us through essentially a digest of what you've written. Obviously, people should read it, but could you give us an abbreviated version, Nina?
Sure. Well, I mean, looking through the files, one of the many patterns that we were starting to notice is that Epstein had made, it was buddy with an awful lot of the Arab oil tyrants, the monarchs in UAE, in Saudi, in Bahrain, but especially eventually with the Saudis and with the UAE guys. And so we started looking at it, and the more we looked, the more we felt, well, this is actually what Trump gave Kushner credit for. The Abraham Accords were reached in 2020. Kushner had been made Middle East envoy. I'm actually writing part 2 to it this week, and it's going to be more about Kushner's rise and how he stepped into what Epstein was doing. But Trump picks his cabinet the way a reality show director and a mob boss would pick his people. So he picks them by their look and then by their blood tie to him. So of course Ivanka got the woman stuff, and his son-in-law, who's an Orthodox Jew and whose family is so close to Netanyahu that Netanyahu literally slept in teenage Kushner's bed when he came to visit them and stayed in New Jersey. And so that's the person that he puts in charge of Middle East negotiations and handling Middle Eastern affairs. And when Kushner shows up, they've been dealing with Epstein for a long time, and Epstein had been doing exactly the same thing that Kushner would end up doing, which was Epstein is in there. You see him trying to solicit money from these guys and go into business with them. He's always got schemes and scams that they can get involved with, and then he's also making sure that he's on the side helping Israel, making Tel Aviv more palatable to these guys in one way or another, and not in an overt diplomacy way, but he knew what they wanted. He knew that they wanted things like, they had money, but what they want is like the kind of social cachet that you get when you're part of the Western world, and they're not. So they, sports washing and green washing and science washing and tech washing. So he was kind of working on that with them. And what's amazing is that we discovered that Epstein, literally while he was still in prison in Palm Beach, is communicating with Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak, who they'd been friends with for we don't actually know how long. But in 2009, when he's still in prison, Ehud Barak first introduces him to Terje Rod Larsen, the Norwegian who is lionized for his role in the 1993 Oslo Accords, which your listeners will probably remember were treated as, this great success, this great breakthrough in Middle Eastern peace. It was during the Clinton years, when in fact, if looking back on it now and seeing what's happened in Gaza, it was just kicking the can on the two-state solution. They did nothing. And in fact, it enabled the Israelis to spend the next 3 decades basically packing more settlers, more fanatics into the West Bank and seizing more property, more land, right? So this Terje Rod Larsen becomes Epstein's buddy. Epstein's buttering him up. He gives him money. He buys him a Greek island pad. He puts in his will that the Terje Rod Larsen's children will get $10 million, on and on and on, and gives Terje Rod Larsen medical care in the United States. And meanwhile, Rod Larsen is handing him off all this information about the UN and introducing him to his Middle Eastern contacts, because of course, Mr. Oslo Accords has a lot of contacts in other Arab countries besides the Palestinian territories. So he introduces him to people like, the UAE leaders, the sheikhs there, and incredibly, he introduces them to, or connects him through this to the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, and Epstein is literally minutes out of house arrest, is over there meeting with the Palestinian leader. What is this? What's going on here? Like you're thinking like this guy's like a known pedophile, arrested, convicted felon, has to have sex offender written into his passport, and he's crossing borders and going around the Middle East, starting from the time he gets out of prison. So for 9 years, until he dies in prison in the other prison in New York, he'd been running around. He's also doing a lot in Europe, but he's basically really focused on buttering up these sheikhs and trying to hit the heavy hitters of Saudi Arabia to go into business with him. He's wining and dining with them. He's introducing them to people. He's proposing, let's have an all-star soccer game in the UAE, and he sends a letter to Maktoum, the son of the sheikh in Dubai, who famously kidnapped both of his daughters, and like one of them is literally, they're in house arrest because they were trying to live like normal people. And so he's pitching Maktoum, the sheikh, on I have so many friends in the tech world, and I know you're very future oriented, and we can do business together. I can introduce you to people in Silicon Valley. These fawning, cringeworthy letters, which will be in my column this week. And so that's what Epstein was up to. Epstein, as the Middle East envoy, the unofficial Middle East envoy, certainly was in cahoots with Tel Aviv. And then, what happens, and what I'm writing about this week, is how he sort of fades as Kushner gets the Middle East envoy position from Trump, and Kushner very quickly is the sheikhs over there read him as naive and easy to manipulate, and MBS just bear hugs him. And to this day, they're pals. And Epstein, or sorry, Kushner is in the White House WhatsApping directly with these Arab sheikhs, while the State Department is going, wait a minute, do we have a parallel State Department going on here? What's going on? The president's son-in-law running Middle Eastern policy. And so now, here we are. Oh, and of course, then he gets the credit for the Abraham Accords, which, by the way, they were already pals with Israel. They were already on these deals were already going on. They were just never official. It was all back channel. That became public. So 4 of the Arab countries, 2 of the main ones and 2 lesser, become normalized relations with Israel. Kushner got credit for it. Then he gets out of the White House. What does he do? Immediately, he solicits money from Saudis. MBS gives him $2 billion for his nascent little investment company, Affinity Partners or something. And then, it's now Trump too. And what does Trump too do with his Middle Eastern policy? Well, of course, what anybody would do. You hire 2 New York real estate guys to go over there and make peace between Gaza and Israel, and then go over to Qatar or Oman and negotiate with the Iranians. 2 Jewish real estate guys from New York. That's who he put in charge of dealing with these Iranians. And they have no training in nuclear science. They didn't have anyone sitting at the table with them explaining what was going on in Iran with these centrifuges. And apparently they just, this is reported, MBS is texting him. MBS wants war with Iran. He doesn't like Iran. Iran is a power center that's not good for the Saudi oil tyrants. And so he's texting with his friend Jared throughout the negotiations, don't do it. And so at some point, I guess that, they're saying that Tehran actually had like a very viable peace plan on the table. And Witkoff and Jared just got up and left. At the end of the weekend came and they just left. And the next thing you know, 2 days later, 36 hours later, Trump's ordering bombing. So, I mean, this is the situation we're in. It's a farce. It would be farce if it wasn't so dangerous. And maybe it's even is just going to be farce. Like the human race is going to end in this, the 70 million Americans elected this dumbass and his team of thieves. And now we're in a situation where they've gotten us into something that they can't get their feet out of.
Right, and the New York Times is reporting today that MBS is weighing in heavily all the time on Trump to finish the job. And of course, he's making money because, he's got himself in this disaster with his neon ridiculous project in the middle of nowhere. And now, of course, the Saudis aren't subject to the closing of the Straits of Hormuz because they have oil pipelines that go to the Red Sea where they can export. And the price of oil now, of course, is massively high. So both Putin and MBS are the winners of this war so far, along with American oil companies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're not even talking about the thing, you see it kind of in the independent media and Twitter, but the mainstream media hasn't really covered the whole issue with the fertilizer that there's like a big problem where they can't get fertilizer through the Straits of Hormuz either. And there are whole countries that are needing to start, it's spring and they need to start planting. And this could lead to famine in places where you've never seen it before.
Right, in the tech sector, with all of their AI money being spent on these big data centers, these big data centers need helium, and helium comes from Qatar, and the straits are closed. So there's lots of ancillary disasters mixed up in this monumental disaster underway.
And let's just say, Ian, every bit of this was predictable. Anybody who had read anything about Donald Trump would have known that nothing that he gets his hands into works, other than his TV show, which somebody else was running.
Right. Well, this is a reality TV presidency, but as much as, MBS, Trump, and Netanyahu are the villains, I think we also have to blame ourselves, because Trump got reelected, and he got elected twice in this country.
Absolutely. It's our eternal shame.
Right. Well, I thank you for joining us, Nina. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Ian.
And again, I've been speaking with Nina Burleigh, who's a senior editor at The New Republic, best-selling author, documentary producer, and publisher of the Substack American Freak Show, a professor at New York University's Arthur J. Carter Journalism Institute. She is the author of Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women, and she has a new novel, Turnaround, Don't Drown. And she's the producer of a documentary series on Apple TV, Epstein's Shadow, and she has an article at American Freak Show, The Epstein Accords Part 1, The Road to Riyadh. And this has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producers Graham Fitzgibbon, Asher Price, and Sasha Linden-Cohen. If you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we include extended interviews, searchable by topic, and have made it easier for you to sign up for daily email updates and provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we highly encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook at Ian Masters Media, and our new social media manager, Luke Susswood, is also posting highlights from the show on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Ian Masters Media. So please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And to help sustain this program into the future and ensure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate and/or at publictruthmedia.org, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Background Briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.